So I'm entirely fascinated about Black students working with Black teachers. There's a lot of research that looks at it from the perspective of how harshly Black students have been punished in schools, looking at implicit bias in the classroom and that sort of thing. I'd like to raise a few questions and concerns that I have about the reverse. Black students looking at Black teachers. Part of this is prompted by, of course, my own interest as a Black as a Black teacher working with students, having had teachers of all colors and hues throughout, but also understanding that I needed to, initially at least, when it came to school, I perhaps needed Black teachers to help me feel comfortable in that space. I needed to see how the teachers interacted, particularly how they interact with the Black teachers, because many people, I've come to understand as a Black adult, most people on the planet have never had a Black person in any capacity of authority in their lives. So, for example, I'm at a training institute right now, and there's a group outside of mine, a group of like 14, 15-year-old kids, mostly, they all sound British. I think they're all born and raised in Britain, most of them, but they're all Asian and white kids. I think there are like 2 or 3 Black kids. And I expect they've come from environments where they've not had Black authorities. And just to see how even those kids who don't know me, have nothing to do with me, respond to me or even see me in the shared space in our common areas and breakfast rooms leads me to think something very similarly to what I experienced in my own classrooms. Students have told me recently, students that I'm very close to now, because we've gotten to know each other over the past few years, they said to me when they first met me, they thought I didn't like Black people. They thought that I was just one of those, basically what people of my generation would call a sellout, or shall I say a whack sellout. And from what they explained, it had to do with how I dress and present myself. And from what I can understand from what they were saying, because like right now, for example, I'm using a semi-professional or more formal way of speaking than I would with my own friends. And for them, because they had never had a Black authority in their lives, they had never experienced a Black person speaking other than in an informal way. And they were quite harsh from what they said. They were harsh in judging me. They wrote me off from the beginning. They, of course, expected that I would treat them the same. Now, very quickly, they learned that that's not who I am, but it gives me the feeling that I was right in my assumption that I had to work. You know what they say, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Well, I had to work twice as hard with those kids. So I had to talk about and research and actually code switch in the classroom. They had to see that I wear different hats. They had to know that that I'm close to. They had to know who I was outside of the classroom to even pay attention to me. Now, because I share the classroom with people who are a different races, ages, sometimes different genders, and certainly different nationalities. I'm an American, a Nigerian American, and I work in the UK. I see the difference, and I see how implicitly, for example, older white men are just seen as an authority. They speak, people listen. I see it all the time. Or kids who've come from abroad and they've never really faced a Black person. I hear all the time from kids from China, from India, that I'm really cool. They think that I'm so cool. And I think that for them, again, that's the only vernacular that they know to speak about a Black person with any form of power, is that they're really cool, they dress well, maybe they even look good and that sort of thing. And it's a catch-22 of how do you do this? Because on the other side, I know that there are, again, non-Black students who've never had a Black person in authority in their lives. And they're like, well, who is this guy? So I know that my Black colleagues have done things like make sure that their titles are visible, that students know. For example, I think the majority of us have a PhD in my job. By design, we have to be really qualified, more qualified than everyone else. I'm so sorry. It's cold season. But that really makes me laugh because anyway. But we have to make sure that the students know that we have earned the positions that we're in, but that we're also able to walk in different spaces. And I think the students need to know significantly more about us than they would require to know about um, a white person. I'm also gay. And of course, throughout my life, I've noticed this, but even in the classroom, people think gay people are either frightening or cool. And there's just that divide. So again, the black students who didn't know how to relate to me in the beginning, they said things like, "You're the first gay person that I've actually spoken with, and taken seriously." Now, institutionally, I've often thought, well, if I'm going to bring ethnic minorities into my space and working, what would I do to support them and how would I present them to our clientele, in this case, students? Because I think that there's something different that universities need to be doing to be supportive of Black staff. I take it quite seriously because I'm a sociologist, but I don't teach directly in my discipline. So of course I'm around people who academically are very different. They think very differently. They approach the world very differently. As I say, every discipline on a college campus is thinks they know the meaning of life, and they're teaching it to their students. So whether you're studying nursing, business, or art, you think that you have the secret to life and that you and your students can figure it out together. So it's that kind of humility that I don't see in some disciplines like business, for example. People really do believe that what they know is the center of what is to be known. Um, and so how do we, in such rigid environments, because, for example, there's a lot of research on the business world, how do we bring in issues of gender, race, class? How do we think about intersectionality? Because I've noticed in my job, when I first started teaching this about 6, 7 years ago, I actually had colleagues throw in my face student comments about, why are we talking about feminism in an ethics course? A few years later, now that there is so much more awareness about gender equality and fairness in the workplace, not just for women, but for a whole range of people, I think that more people are able to think and speak intersectionally. We are in a very different place. I think every business school has ethics as a mandatory course now. And not only that, sustainability. It's not just a nice to have or an addendum, but many people, because of social demands and because of climate environmental demands, they see sustainability as central to what a business does, and that they understand that ecological sustainability is related to the sustainability of the people within your organization all along the supply chain. So from the people who work and assemble your products, to the people who design your products, from the people who transport and finance and market your products, that there's something about environmental sustainability and economic fairness that is interrelated. And so suddenly everyone's talking about it. I must admit I'm a little burnt out with it because it's... And so now that the world has forced sustainability onto everyone's agenda, we're seeing every discipline, but every discipline within and where I teach, talk about sustainability. Whereas again, just a few years ago, people like me would have been openly, I would even say marginalized, implicitly marginalized, labeled as a liberal, and I don't mean liberal as in liberal. I mean liberal as in anti-liberal, and you hear a lot of that in the business environment that's changing. So I'm really looking to help people have these conversations, particularly when it comes to empowering students of color, because I attended a conference just this past week from the Chartered Association of Business Schools, and we were talking about the so-called, what's called here in the UK, there's a term BAME, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic students, talking about the attainment gap and the achievement gap, and what we can do about it in the classroom. I'll get into that later, but it is very much tied to the notion of cultural capital, both the cultural capital that the students bring to the classroom and their expectations, and how we as teachers value that. But I'm also asking in this instance, what kind of cultural capital do Black teachers bring to the classroom? Because certainly the idea of our value and worth has shifted over the past few years.